as in true fashion, when I sort of re-looked at some of this data, which we'll go into, I found like more little things. And then I found also some discrepancies as well. So it's been a bit of fun to kind of be sitting with this data for a couple of years, I suppose, and then revisit it and just go, oh, actually, there's more information here. What does it mean? I don't know. It doesn't matter. But it's a bit of fun. To chat about it. All right. I'm going to kick us off because I value your time and we are recording this. I value your time and I value mine. So thank you for joining me on this little adventure of Reflector Birth Windows. So I'm just sharing my screen. I don't know if you can see me or not in the little, yeah, cool. Because it's not about me. It's just about the exploration of fun. So without further ado, I am going to kick us off. And I want to talk about, firstly, the data. So if you've ever seen this data, it's just a big dump in a notepad or a text file that shows us in UTC time the date, the time, and our incarnation cross, which is our Sun Earth on design and personality sign. And it goes here to obviously when it ends. And so I've been looking at this for a while, and it's always really handy for us because we have this snapshot from 1941 right through until 2033. So obviously there's more data available, but this is what somebody has gifted us. And so from 1941, we're looking here, and if you know anybody born in 1941, you can see it's a big window. They're 83 years old. And the reason I started looking at this a few years ago, well, actually more than a few years ago, was when it came into my orbit. My father was transitioning through life, and I wanted to sort of like look back through his life. And I knew that he was born in 1942. I obviously knew his birth date, but I didn't know his exact time. And so when I found this, I discovered he was a reflector as well. So I'm like, well, who else is a reflector? And so I then, navigated through that journey. And if you've ever been on the podcast with me, it's something that I really like to chat about, is that taking that journey back when we find out, we're reflectors or people in our lives are reflectors. It's like, what does this mean? How did I not see this? Or what are there any telltale signs of this reflectorisms? So I went a little bit more into it, and I went a bit first line here and broke everything down. So I started to really weave the data a little bit more cleanly. I'm an ex-programmer, so I could just kind of like grab this data and start running some queries on it as best I could. And you can see here through this massive spreadsheet that I've created, we can really link it up to the incarnation crosses. So I've gone further. I won't discuss that on today's call, but I've gone further into breaking down times and sort of studying that. And now I'm kind of like handing it over to the tribe to go, if you're interested in this, then here you go. Here's some data that you can play with as well. But this was my journey of looking at the data. And so for those curious, or for those who also are programmers or whatever, I actually just ran this through Python. So I was just using Python to strip it down and format it in a way that was available. Since then, I've also found that I can have access to a bigger database, an ephemeris. As long as I'm not using it professionally, I don't have to pay a license fee. So anyway, the nerds in the room, or forever who listens to this, there are ways that you can get your hands on this data as well without using, other people's data. So today, I just wanted to share some of my findings with you. We won't go too deep. We won't go too long, but just to kind of like scratch that curiosity if you had it like I have had it. And that might be enough for you. So I'm just going to check and see if anybody else has joined while we're going. If you are, please, you are more than welcome to say hello. Robin, hi. Anybody else who's here or who is listening at home, hello if you are catching this later. Okie dokie. So Here's what I found. Very briefly, here's what I found. I found a lot of years where there were no reflectors born at all, obviously. I found a lot of years where there was massive windows. And by windows, I just mean that there was a lot of data in a certain year set. I found years where there was kind of a really small amount of data as well. And I also found years where there was probably many windows, and windows I mean by a duration of time, but they were really small. So they're only like an hour. And I think, wow, for me, my curious mind, it just goes, wow, 1 hour, in a 6-month period where you had that chance to be born a reflector. And I think that's quite special. So, I that's what excites me when I find these small nuggets of data, and I just go, wow, that's kind of unique, to be the 1%, but also 1% within the 1%. And please feel free to use the chat or ask a question if you want. Hi, Esther. As we go through, we're all friends here, and I think most of us are non-sacrals. I know that some of the sacrals did register. We had about 87 people register, just from my little thing, but you know what it's like. You go, oh no, I'm not in the mood now, so I'm not going to. That's fine. Okay, so let's have a look. Let's get into it. Let's go straight into it here. So this is a little graph for you. Hopefully you can see it. If you're on a phone, I'm sorry. I can actually share this with you afterwards. But you can see here we have some real high rows. And when you're looking at this row here, which is the 30, this is just how many rows that is. And so that might be just a day. So that day may be a full day, or it may just be an hour. So an entry to me is a row. I hope that makes sense to everybody. Give me a yep if it does. It's pretty basic. So you can see here in 1941, it was 33. Look at all these. Look at all these reflectors born in 1941. Hey, it's like, and then it drops down 1942, 43, 40. Actually, these are the ones that don't have reflector windows in them. So you can see here. So what I've flagged is for the main data that we want to look at. But 1941 is a big year. And those people, as I said before, they're 83 now. So, and they've gone through a life, a journey with themselves. We can see another 2 lot of windows here, but I'm bringing your attention to the 60s, 64 especially, 26 rows. So, and 50, this is 53 here as well. The 90s, look at this data in the 90s. This is what excited me. Now, the 90s, when I look at the data, so it's all good and well to be born in 1941, but when we start kind of impacting the world, just in my experience here, we're often getting into our 20s and 30s. So I often think these 41s, these people born in 41, they were also starting to venture out into the world in their 20s. So we're looking into the 60s. The 60s, obviously, we're looking into the 80s and the 90s. And look at these 90s here. Look at this big window over the period of 5 years in the 90s of reflectors. They were just sitting up there. And that, may I bring your attention to, they would have all been roughly becoming 30 in 2020, which is COVID, right? And didn't human design boom during COVID? And a lot of you are probably late 80s, early 90s. I know a lot of, I don't know, some of us aren't, but a lot of you are, and a lot of the people that I speak to are. And so I look at this and I go, well, what does that mean? Probably nothing, but it's just to entice your curiosity. Now, it seems here when you just look at this subset of data, it kind of like ventures sort of like through this little meandering up and down, up and down. What's also interesting is you can see here in 2033, there's another peak. What's coming? And that was another reason that I started to, besides the fact that my dad's a reflector and was born in 1942, I also wanted to start looking at, because I can think about shit that makes no sense, because open head, open, we got to think about things that don't really matter. 2027, everyone talks about 2027. So I thought, well, what's happening with the data set in 2027? Or more importantly, what's happening from this cohort here and how old will they be in 2027? So you can see where my mind goes. Your mind mightn't go there, but I do. I sort of look at a subset and then I'm like, well, what's happening in 20 or 30 years from that? So we're going to have a little bit of an exploration of that. Now, this here is a data set of the reflector windows where there was no reflectors born in a period of time in this lovely teal color. Hopefully it stands out for you. So we can see we've got a lot of windows here where there was no reflectors born at all. And you can see a couple of windows here, especially in the 60s, where there was 2 to 3 years where there was no reflectors born at all. And coming up here, you can see that there seems to be a little bit more of a consistency of, and we're looking at that data. What I went so far as explored as well is looking at the data of, was there any patterns to years between when reflectors had been born and when reflectors hadn't been born. And I can share this with you. I couldn't really find a pattern because I was looking for one, but it seems to be, it kind of goes 4-7. So we've got a 4-7 break, 4 years, 7 years, 3 years, 3 years, 1 year, 5 years, 4 years. As you can see, no real direct patterning. But if we look at then what's happening in the world, maybe there is a pattern. Maybe there's not, or maybe it's just I'm making shit up. But you can see here, it's really, really interesting. And so if you're looking at your family, or if you're looking at people in your life, you can kind of just go, okay, well, I know that my family member, my aunt, my grandmother, or whoever it was born in this window. Straight away, you can just rule that person out, that they're not a reflector. So yeah, interesting that the 70s here really did give us this, sorry, I'm circling the wrong screen. They did not really bring a lot of reflectors in the 70s and 70s. Maybe we needed a break. Or maybe we knew that in 20 or 30 years' time that there was these couple of years where we didn't need to be around. Don't know. Curious. All right. So the world events, and I'm sharing a lot of stuff that I've kind of just grabbed from Wikipedia and the Encyclopedia Britannica through the course of my life. And if you know, you know how good those books were. Again, first line. I love it. So when we look at this data, or when I looked at this data, as I was saying before, I wanted to explore what was happening in the world, what was happening during this data set where we had an influx, say here with 1941. One, I wanted to look at what was happening in 1941 or prior to bring in such a huge data set, to have so many windows. Could just be random, but for exploration's sake, let's entertain it. And also throughout these other peaks, and look at what was happening. And so we know in the 40s, especially when we're looking at this first part of the data here, the 40s, sorry for a history lesson here, friends. We had World War II. We had World War II. I'm just checking that chat before I go any further. Donnelly's just saying here, she's a 58, the little bitty bar. And she's saying, I think it's determined by when the planets were in alignment with the cosmos. Absolutely. Absolutely. But that influences us as well here on Earth School. Yeah. Okay, I'll keep going. So we had the 40s here, and in the 40s, you can see we kind of had this highlight and then a low. We had World War II. Sorry, it seems to be a lot of war in here. So I just want to preface this with a bit of a trigger warning. We seem to like war. World War II, we had Pearl Harbor. We had Hiroshima, D-Day. It was full on in the 40s. Okay. So we want to look at that as well, about did these energies, cosmos align, whatever happens. So if we go into our 50s, coming up into this data set here, you can see there's a kind of a general kind of path here. And the 50s, we still had a bit of war. We had the Korean War and things like that. Now, there's other countries that there may have been things happening on the wherever it is, but I'm not privy to. I didn't dig overly deep, but I just kind of looked at what were the main themes that were happening throughout the global cycles. So in the 50s as well, we also had a lot of the civil rights movement as well. So speaking from the feminine point of view, feminine aspects were really starting to ramp up as well in the 50s. So that's here. Now coming into our 60s, we really got on board with civil rights movements. So we're getting, you know, a lot. But what's happening in the data? Don't know. I mean, you can kind of look at it yourself and just go, is there something that was happening there? Those born, again, looking in hindsight, those born in 1941, and we're going to get into the incarnation crosses in a minute because it's really interesting for you to explore those incarnation crosses that were coming in during this phase as well, which I actually might deviate and share with you, if I may. Is that okay? Pearl Harbor, 1941, Britta. Thanks, Britta. All right, we're going to deviate a little bit. Can we ask A1 for help? AI?
Yeah, AI.
We could, but that's no fun for me. I like to do it myself. We could. You could definitely run all this stuff through AI. I'm sure if you uploaded a data set to it and it knew what you were doing. I'm going to get into the incarnation crosses. Yes. Okay, Destiny. We'll just go there. We'll deviate. We'll just like cut to the chase because I like that too. So 41, you can see here. In the 1941s, this is really where we had a lot of the cross of rulership. Now, the cross of rulership is a very prolific theme throughout a lot of our incarnation crosses. We also had the cross of consciousness. So there also was a lot of alpha in here as well. Seemed to be very heavy on the cross of rulership, the cross of penetration, and the cross of consciousness. And that was from 41. Yep. We didn't see a vessel of love until 44, but most of it was definitely rulership. So if you look at the gates in most of these, whether they're the cross of rulership 1, 2, and 3. So when you see a cross that's got a number next to it, they're still the same gates. They're just in a different order. Obviously, definitely a different theme, but they still hold the same gates. So, you know, the cross of rulership, we're looking here at the 47 to 22, 45, and 26 for those of you gate nerds, which I know, Destiny, you're right into as well. So this is a theme through the 40s where we had not very much vessel of love. The right angle cross of tension started to come in around 45. But a lot of it was rulership. We had a very small sprinkle of revolution. Sorry, my mower man's here because this is Australia. And she'll be right, mate. What I said to him, I said, oh, could you come another day? And he goes, I can't. And I went, okay, fine. So if you can hear that, this is Australia. Okay. Where was I? Oh, Britta was just saying here as well in the 50s is the Red Scare. What was that? Oh, you can't hear it. Good, Destiny. Well,
the Red
exactly.
Scare. Oh,
sorry.
Can I interrupt? Sorry,
Yeah.
I don't want to interrupt. The Red Scare was a huge fear of communism in the US. It was like primarily after World War II. It was huge in the 1950s. Like Hollywood celebrities got blacklisted because they were communists. And so it was like I don't know how that affected the rest of the world, but it was huge here, but particularly the 50s.
Yeah, wow, that's cool. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, so our 40s, and again, I'm going to share this with you afterwards so you can do your own digging, because I like to do my own digging as well, and I totally get it. But if you don't, you don't. But we definitely had rulership. Rulership really, really is a big theme for the 40s, with like sprinklings of things. And as I was saying, the vessel of love didn't even make a mention until 1945 here. So there was a long time. We're getting into the late 1940s, where we had a little bit of, as I was saying, the cross of refinement coming in. The cross of refinement really like brings in a little bit of that 3319. What does that mean? Not sure. Like, you can look at the gates and you can just go, well, what is this, again, going back, what does this energy need? Not maybe at that time, but in future times. So that's where my head goes. Your head might go into a different space, but I don't think that a child born in 1941 can do much until they're maybe about 20 or 30. So, or even with that impact, or even with that energy. And this is not just, this is for all types as well, but we're talking to the reflector. In the late 40s, I know we still had a lot of this war. In the late 40s here, it was mixed with, actually, you know what I might do? I might just share with you this screen here, because I think that it'll be so much easier if you could see what I'm looking at. I'm just going to stop this share, and I'm going to show you my data set. That might be more fun. That's the right one there. Okay, you can see all that. I'm just going to move you over. Alrighty. Close that window down, don't need that. So I'm just showing you here. Now this is the discrepancy, just for transparency's sake. Juxtaposition crosses, and we're going to get into those a little bit afterwards. When we look at the data, or when we're running the data, the juxtaposition crosses often don't come up unless you actually add them in manually, which I found. So I'm yet to do that. So I've kind of manually been wanting to do that. But anyway, as you can see here, if we're looking at the 1940s, I'll just go a little slow. You can see that certain things are sort of like coming in here. You can see here heavy amount of rulership in the 40s. 1947, blip. 1948, we're getting into a little bit more, and you can see that the vol starts coming in here a little bit more through this period. And you can see here in the data set, when I hand it over to you, that you can see the time. So from the 20th, right, so that was a day and a bit. So we've got a little bit of time here with the vessel of love. Again, looking maybe 20 years forward in that, it's like, well, what was needed there? And certain gates are sort of sprinkling in as well. So this is where we're at with here. So in the 50s, we're kind of, as I was saying, we're getting a little bit more into the, you can see a lot of the cross of four ways. And I'm fairly certain this is where we first start seeing the sphinxes come through. Destin, it might be interesting for you. So they don't really show up very often in certain data sets, and then they'll kind of like come in guns blazing with sphinxes as well. So I'm just going to scroll through here so you can have a look. You can also see a heavy amount of Eden coming in here as well. And so you can just so you can look at here, Eden, that's Eden 2, but essentially they're all making up the 36-6, the 12 and 11, just in different ways, different themes through their sun. So in the 40s, we had a little bit of the cross of tension. You can see it weaving back in here. Again, you can plot this yourself. I won't sit there and go through this, because we all have a kind of like a theory through our own lens, and I don't kind of want that. But what I want to bring your attention to is, as we were talking about coming into, here you go, Donnelly, here's your year, 58.
I'm a cross of consciousness, and 4, very last line,
Yeah.
but I don't see the date to confirm it. But those are the numbers.
So the dates here in UTC time. So for that's 0. It's
December 6th, 1 day. Oh my God, that is so weird. Like 1 day. I mean, there's probably a window during that day that you had to land, right?
yeah. Yeah.
All the stars aligned.
Yeah.
It really is amazing when you think about it. This is so educational. Thank you for doing this.
It's fine. It's just funsies. And I know
Well,
that
and I
I'm
love your
hoping that people
gift.
will maybe just go and do a little bit more with it than us. I mean, when you see it like this, you see it on my little graph there before, but when you sort of see it like this, you're like, what the heck? 1959. And then we had this tiny little window here. 1960, 1961, nothing. So the 60s, the 70s, there was 2-year windows between those. So when you look at it at different angles, or you look at what was happening in there, especially where the gates were moving, the incarnation crosses, because where the imprints were, it's like, okay, well, what's going on, if anything? But especially looking through my lens of going, what's happening in the 80s or the 90s that needed this energy to come through. So being passionate about the reflectors themselves. Do you have any questions, anybody? Would you like me to? Where are you? Destiny, do you have any questions? I know you probably will. Nope. Where's my little... Yes, Esther, please feel free to talk. Just had to move you.
Hi everybody. I'm in 1976 August window reflector, and when you were showing the previous graph and this, it made me think that it would be interesting to layer this across a different time, because we're thinking of years like with our traditional calendar. So an interesting experiment would be to use other calendars and see if there's a pattern, as you were talking about patterns. So that's what I thought about. And this is super cool. I'm nerding out with you. So thank you for doing this.
And thank you for saying that too, because again, I'm in little old Australia here, and some things didn't affect me. I was a 70s baby. So there's a lot that I don't know about. I don't know about, a lot of things that are happening in South America, or maybe even in Russia, or some of those countries. So it's a really, really good point. Hopefully someone takes up the stick. Destiny saying she's curious the cross themes compared to the events happening during those times. Absolutely. And I could go on a bender, but I wanted to not go to, I mean, I've done my own exploration, and I think it's important that, there'll be a curiousness that you could look at yourself. So I'm inviting people to, get curious. For what reason? Fun. Donnelly?
I'm really curious as to the planetary positions. Like, we're in a really unique time right now. And if you follow astrology, they're talking about it. And I'm feeling like we all came in at times that were pristine for higher mind functioning. And that's because we have no definition. Like, we're open to seeing multiple perceptions without a big bias.
Yeah.
And that's a true gift when we've been so divided.
Yeah.
And I do feel like they're coming in when the bigger planets are in these pristine times to be in a position of having the greatest impact, whatever that means, right? Like, but there's some rhythm to it. And I don't think there's enough data yet to even figure that out, because some planets take 200 plus years to circle the Earth, and other planets take a year, right? Like the moon goes around in a month. I mean, right? So every planet is different in its rotation, thus giving a different timeline, if you would, right?
Yeah. And that's a big thing, especially those outer-lying planets. That's a chat for another day. But the outer-lying planets, because they do move so slowly, there's often a bigger theme, and it could be a really big theme of people's energies over a course of a couple of years. But I mean, they're still going to be in a gate, so that's still going to happen. It's about when those gates become channels, which we don't get. So there are crosses, there are incarnation crosses that a reflector can never have, because it creates a channel. So you look at them, you're like, well, where's that cross and where's that cross? It's like, well, they can't be there because they form a channel, so that's not a reflector. But we'll move on because it is fascinating.
Yeah, I would love to know the ones that can't be, because those have to be our
well, the sleeping phoenix can't be anything that's got a 2034. Yeah, so
okay.
you'll never see a sleeping phoenix as a
Thank you.
reflector.
Thank you.
Yeah. Britta's just saying here, I think it's fascinating that us 90s reflectors were born when Pluto was at home in Scorpio. There's something there, I'm convinced. There you go. Go down that rabbit hole. Also, cross of planning can't be a reflector. Absolutely. So the cross of planning actually came up in this data set. So when I first ran it, the cross of planning came up, and I was like, oh my gosh, there was only one cross of planning, and that was this year in March. And I went, no, that can't be right. So that's a juxtaposition. So yeah, I'll get into that in a minute. I might actually. Does anybody else have any questions about this? I know Destiny was saying the themes throughout time. So it's a bigger dive for. I might hand that over. There goes the dogs. I might hand that over to you guys to look at. So I'll just go back to my little thing here. What have I done? I've created a bunch of. Here goes the whippersnipper now. All right, let's go. So that was just here. So if you want it, that you can research yourself of the world events. Sorry, I'm just reading the chat. Oh, okay, cool. All right, let's move on. So this is just another graphic of showing kind of like, can you hear that? You can't hear that? Gosh, you're lucky. Someone's got the whippersnipper going full ball. I might just have to yell. I sort of just like gave this here for people who visually need to see it. But again, you saw the spreadsheet there before. Sometimes it's nicer to kind of just see it broken down in those rows and those dates and those times. Okay, so incarnation crosses. A bit crude, but here's the data set of the most common throughout this sample of data that I've got. So we've got the right angle cross of rulership, obviously taking out the lead throughout the history of this space of time. The four ways seems to be really popular as well. And you can see here the count's still quite up there, rulership. Right angle cross of consciousness. Now, when I was looking at this as well, just so you know, I know there are multiple versions of these, hence why they're probably more prolific, because there's often 1, 2, 3, and 4 on those. So I just grouped them all together. So given that could be why they're up there a little bit higher, because there is multiple versions of how they can be about. Just checking the chat, making sure I'm. So we got the right angle cross of tension coming in here as well. The Sphinx, Maya, Eden, vessel of love, penetration, and the unexpected. So these are our top crosses throughout this data of the 90 years. All right angles. Yes, absolutely. Sorry, all right angles. Now, right angle is obviously, for those playing along, there are a lot more right angles than there are left angles, because the left angle is only the 5-1, the 5-2, the 6-2, and the 6-3. Okay, so thinking about that there's only the 4, 5-1, 5-2, 6-2, 3. Yeah, I had to check that. and then the juxtaposition. So in all of our incarnation crosses, there's 63 juxtapositions, which are the 4 ones. And they are obviously the least amount because they're rare. Yeah, all right angles. Okay. Cool, fun. So here we go. These are the least amount of incarnation crosses. So we have at the lowest is individualism, endeavor, revolution, uncertainty, demands, prevention, confrontation, spirit, and separation. And they are all left angles. So yeah, and then obviously right down here at like probably less than 5 are the juxtaposition, but that's where I found a discrepancy in the data, and I have to go back and add all the juxtapositions in, because I'd actually like to show something to you about juxtaposition, if I may. Does everyone mind me just going off on my own little tangent here? Yeah, cool. All right. Because that's what
Let's
I do.
go tangents.
Let's go. You know me. All right. I'm just going to share my big screen again with you. So I want to show you, just move that over. I'm just using neutrino here. And these were some of me finding juxtaposition and what it was showing up in the data. So when I was looking at the data, it would show a certain incarnation cross data set, and I'd be thinking, what's going on with that? Because that shouldn't be that. That can't be what you were saying there before, Britta. That can't be cross-of planning. Cross-of planning's got a channel. And so I'm like, what's going on with that? Why would it be pulling it in as a reflector window? And that's because you can see here, what's this one here? This is cross-of planning. I'm just going to grab the slider here and just show you how it quickly swaps over. I'll just scroll this down a little bit. Excuse me. Is it going to let me see? There we go. So cross-of planning 4, and you can see it's a 9, 16, 40, 37. And just within that second, it flips. And that's where sometimes when you get the data, it kind of gets confused because it's swapping over to this juxtaposition. So that's where it's like there's a discrepancy in a little bit of the data feed that we have with the incarnation cross gates and name. So just sharing that with you as well. So, you know, when you go through it, you can be like, oh, that's not right. But that's where it that's how quickly it flicks from this to this. And Sleeping Phoenix is very, very much the same. When we're looking at, you know, it kind of like jumps. I'll scroll down so you can see here. It kind of, it's jumping quickly to that cross a strategy. So yeah, fun times. Sorry if I've put you on a little deep dive yourself, but and if you do decide to go on a deep dive like this, can you please share with me your findings? Because I'm like, oh, yes, please. Yes, please. Okay. We'll be here all day otherwise. I get very excited about data and graphs. It is fascinating, Britta. It really is. I'm glad you agree. It's just, and then sometimes you think, well, what else can I find? I mean, the mind wants to know random shit, doesn't it? So yeah, this was just a showing here of where the juxtaposition sits. So this is also in the spreadsheet. I've broken it all down. And you can see how closely it kind of like sits here. And in the actual book of incarnation crosses, the juxtaposition is in there. It's just when I did the data, I didn't want to, I thought, oh, this is too hard, because juxtaposition essentially is the same as this, but I then thought, no, hang on. They're your own unique individuals, and they need their own, you know, they need their own space and their own cross, even though it's the same. You can see here for this one, it's the same as the cross of defiance, but it doesn't matter. They deserve. The more I know, the more I want to know. Ruh-roh. It's like that, isn't it? Okay. This was just a little bit of a breakdown here of the least seen incarnation crosses also have sort of like unique windows, and they haven't sort of really been seen too much lately. So you can see here individualization, which was at the lowest. It hasn't been seen since 2018, but it was mostly seen in the 50s and 60s. Sorry, I'm just answering a question. How 1 minute can you be born an MG with a 3420 and the next minute you can be born a reflector? Well, that's when the gates change. But I guess if you were right on the cusp, Britta, I would invite you, if you were right on that line, I'd be like, well, explore both. Yeah, explore it all. Cross of Endeavour is another one. It hasn't been seen since 1997. You know, again, what's going on there? Is it going to come back? Come back, Jack. And Revolution. You can see here it was a lot in the early years, and there's kind of little sprinklings here. So just fun little random factoids. Okay. Any questions with that at all? No? We're good? Okay. Let's move on. Well, that's, I guess, what it comes to. What does this all mean? And it possibly doesn't mean anything, but it's really good to explore the reflector through the lens of just, here's some data, we can have a look at it. Does it mean anything? Probably not. Is it fun to look at? Absolutely. Can, as Esther was saying there before, can we tie it to other things? Absolutely. So I guess for me, this is about inviting you in to explore. I've done this amount of work. I know Roger had done this a little bit about 5 years ago. He shared with me he was trying to do it manually as well. I just had a little bit of programming experience to be able to do it a little bit easier, but you may want to take this yourself. So please I'm opening up the chat if you want me to share something else with you that I've found or ask questions. Now is a really good time. I'm a blessing. Thank you. You're a blessing too. No questions? What are you doing? You're just all like, no, I have nothing to say. Come on. Any questions? Esther, yes.
I'm interested to know if you explored looking at those peaks when there were a lot of reflector windows and looking at like the Chiron, like more or less likely 50 years after that, and where do they fall, like if there's like a certain event or anything like that.
No, but that would be cool because, yeah, and I did start to look at it. I did start to look, especially with, you know, 6 lines and looking at how many, but you see, let me step it back. We can often assume that just because there's a reflector window, it's always going to be all of the profiles, and that's not the case. So then I started to throw the data in, and that became very time consuming. And then I kind of like lost my energy of it, and I had to walk away from it for a while. But no, just because there is a reflector window, it doesn't mean that you're going to get all 12 profiles. There might only just be one. It might just be that juxtaposition that we had in using, for example, in March. So that would be really interesting to explore Chiron. You know, again, I was looking at it as well, going, you know, looking at these 90s beautiful beings that are here, you know, in 2020, it was just after or just during their first Saturn return. They are going to be impacted by that. But what you're saying as well, what happens when they're in their second Saturn return and they're 60? And then we go back and we look at the data of the 40s and stuff like that, and we try and mash it up or marry it up, and we're like, oh, the options are endless. And I just don't have the answers. You know, it's like it's one of those ever asking questions of what if, and I just don't have all the answers. So you can go nuts with this data.
I think it's so fascinating, and yet I think us reflectors are the open ones to be receiving all this new data that's coming in. And I can't help but feel that I am being elevated and changed on a daily basis. Like I can't keep up with myself, if that makes any sense. And I feel like we're here for a reason. We're really here to gauge and reflect our higher consciousness, our ability to hold multiple perceptions in our awareness at one time, which means we can gauge the health of a community, right? Like we're a real value add when someone wants to start making great change, especially in business or government or like, right?
Yep.
Like
Yep.
we're here for such a big reason. And I th- I feel like we need to keep gathering on regular basis to keep this conversation going. First of all, what we're noticing, what's coming into our awareness, what new abilities, strengths, changes are showing up. So we can all keep expanding our awareness to it in our reality and what's showing up for us different.
Yeah. And this is just, again, it's mental stuff. So
Yeah.
I think just gathering and being and just being. I know it's really hard because my mind likes to do shit like this. So,
Mm.
I hear you. I don't have the answers for you. Krista is just asking here, what resources do you recommend to us who are trying to learn more about being a reflector, past the surface level information on most human design websites? I love your podcasting. Oh, thank you. Most of us here, Britta, Jess, Esther, myself, Destiny was here before. We all kind of have been in this space for a while. Donnelly as well. So join a group, have a chat, things like that. It's really, I think it really comes down to you sort of experiencing you and really looking at your chart. I'm hoping to go, not to, but I'm hoping to do a little bit more like monthly or bi-monthly kind of workshops where we're having a bit of fun and it's not educational and you're not like having to listen to somebody like, it's like just really exploring it in a tactile way. So that's my future goal. And this was my first kind of experiment to be able to show something and use my system so it's automated, because as a reflector, I get bogged down. I get into paralysis with shit. But if I can just set it up and then I can just be here, I'm really good. So Krista, just reach out into any of us, because if just ask questions, and we all kind of can point you in different directions. I don't even know your profile, but that would help too. Yeah, Britta's got I don't use Telegram, but Britta does. Yeah, there's heaps of really informed reflectors about. So just reach out. Yeah. Well, I think that's it for us. If you don't have any more questions, again, I've just kind of like, here you go. I've given you a bone. And if you're curious, go and explore it. But at least, oh, sorry, Esther, please. Yep.
I have lots of questions.
I love
3-5.
questions. I love questions.
So how does one get access to this data set?
I'll just send it to you. I'll just send it out. I'll put it on my website and you can just grab it.
Awesome.
It's just there. I mean, it's in the original format that was always on my website or in the links through Reflector Reflections. So you can just have. I just asked that you make a copy. Actually, I won't give you right access to it anyway, but just share with me your findings, because I just really love to know as we all explore this together. So and especially what you were saying, Esther, about like looking at different things that were happening in the world as well as Chiron. So I'm like, okay, here you go. Go explore.
Yeah, absolutely.
Robin,
Thank you
you're
so
a
much.
projector. Thank you. Yeah. Do you have any reflectors in your world? Was she gone already? No, she's still here. But at least you can have a look at that maybe and know that if you've got some in your world, a little bit easier. Yeah. Oh, well. Not on a regular basis. We're very elusive. We're slippery. We're very slippery. All right. Well, those that don't know me, I have the podcast Reflector Reflections. I predominantly just interview reflectors because I feel that we all need a story to share, and telling our story and being in space with each other is the most important thing ever. But I also invite other types on to sort of share their story as well, because we can get caught up in the world. So you can find me on Instagram, Reflector Reflections. I'm often about on Facebook, hit and miss in the reflector groups. Yeah, most of you know me who are left here, and if you don't know me, then that's it. But hopefully going forward, I would like to do a few more of these in a fun workshop way. And the next one I'm looking at doing is September, and it is an actual physical. We're going to do it together online, and it is looking at our transits. It's the most bloody asked question ever. And I've thought, no, I'm going to do this my way, and I'm not going to do it in a really weird way. I'm going to do it my way, and we are going to pick up our coloring and pencils, and we're going to do this. And so I want you to embody your transits and explore transits through just a fun way. So if you're interested, I'm going to share a little bit more of that. But I hope you enjoyed it. I hope that it's been exciting for you just to kind of get into a little bit more uniqueness and fun. And I will send an email to you all in the replay with the link so that you can have a look at the data for yourself. But please bear in mind that there is that discrepancy with the juxtaposition. So I will share it as it is, but just I will probably fix it up later. But yeah, so thank you. And I hope you have a wonderful evening, day, night, morning. All right. Mwah. Bye, beautiful souls.